Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Thursday, February 5th. Derek VanRiper here with Eno Sarris, moving through Pitcher Week. It is part 3 of our starting pitcher preview, which will now run 4 full episodes. We will take a break from this series on Friday to catch up on some news and
completely predictable.
And to discuss how the sausage is made with projections. We got Jordan Rosenblum, the creator of Oopsie, joining us on the Friday episode. Jeff Zimmerman talking about injury grades and the process, the book he wrote with Tanner Bell a few years back, digging into some of the things that he values going into draft season 2. So a little break from the format on the next episode, but today we're picking up where we left off from part 2. We got to about pick 175 overall based on where these starting pitchers are being drafted in very early NFBC drafts, or just early NFBC drafts. People have been drafting since October because it never actually stops. So we're going to call this next group that we're digging into Tier 4B, which doesn't really mean much. It just means these are pitchers that are going between pick 175 and pick 200. But if you're really charting these carefully and grouping them this way, that's where we're at. We're at 4B. Tanner Bibee, Trevor Rogers, Edward Cabrera, Shota Imanaga, Shane Baz, Shane Bieber, and Aaron Nola, all in this group. We begin with Tanner Bibee. I was surprised the K rate dipped as quickly as it did, went down to 21.3% last year. That was part of the reason why that ERA ticked up just above 4. I really thought what he did in 2024 was sustainable. There wasn't a massive velo loss, lost to like 0.3 miles per hour on the fastball. I think he's got 4 pitches he can throw to hitters on both sides. It just seems like maybe 4-seamer location is the biggest thing that Bibee needs to improve in order to get back to his 2024 form.
I think there's a little bit of mix situation there with Tanner Bibee that I think he maybe figured out. If you look at his September split, and you can look at this chart here where I've just put his September and before September pitch usages, I think it stands out that he reduced the sinker usage in half. He reduced the slider usage in more than half, and he replaced those with curves and mostly curves. And the reason I think this works is it fits in with just a general trend. Oh, and cutters for sure. And I think what the general trend for Bibee is away from the four seam, which isn't a very good pitch, and towards these other pitches. And I think what we saw in September was basically pitching backwards. Now, he calls it a cutter. The systems call it a cutter. It looks like a slider. But I think at 31%, he's not into this like dangerous old player or reliever situation where he's throwing the slider 50% of the time. That would actually make me nervous with a starting pitcher. With 30% sliders, that's his best pitch. You throw or cutters, you throw that pitch the most, and you play everything off of that. Why would he reduce the slider, and why would that be good? Because the slider is too close to looking like the cutter. So replacing sliders with curves gives you something that's more differentiated off of the cutter. So you are now ostensibly a cutter, curve, change, and four-seam guy with the occasional sinker and slider maybe against right-handers. This is all in an effort to figure out lefties, to figure out how to take pressure off of that four-seam that does give up homers. But he had a 238 FIP in September. He deserved his good ending of the year. And I love Guardians pitchers early in the year when it's cold. I know it changes over the course of the year there. I see him as slightly more healthy than Gavin Williams. I'm not saying I would necessarily take him over Gavin Williams, but at price, you have now waited a little bit. You've gotten a couple rounds between him and Gavin Williams. And so at price, I will take Tanner Bibee over Gavin Williams, actually.
Yeah, I think Bibee's among the players I like in this pocket. I think I've compared him in the past to Zach Gallen in terms of what I think his ceiling could be. Like, if everything's working for him, it's not necessarily going to be top 15 starting pitcher, but maybe a notch below that in his best years. And I think a typical season's more like 30 to 40 range overall, and he's getting drafted a little bit lower than that in many of his early drafts.
Shane Bieber here. I mean, just a really good breaking ball command, trying to figure out how to put the other pieces in place around it.
Yeah, so in on Bibee at this price for sure. Trevor Rogers, a Lodem favorite from our Discord, the anti-model group of pitchers that, maybe the models don't like, or the projections don't like, or the rankings no longer like. That absolutely described Rogers going into last year. The Orioles were getting buried for the trade they made with the Marlins that brought Rogers over at the 2024 trade deadline. came back and put up some phenomenal ratios, kind of the in-season pickup version of Nathan Eovaldi last year with a 1.81 ERA and a .90 whip over 109 and two-thirds innings. No one's expecting that level to be sustainable, but he did bring a career-low walk rate, pushed the K rate back to a solid sort of level. If you're window shopping the best of his projections, Zips gives you a 3.95 ERA and a 1.27 whip. And if Rogers were to do that over 150 or so innings at this price, you'd be fine with that. It's been a long and winding road for him to get to this point. So I'm curious what you're doing with Rogers this year,
Yeah, if you take a little quick look at this, what the market's like chart that I made. I brought back the markets like. We haven't been doing that on the pitchers so far, but if you look at the markets, what they like better than projections, number one is Shane Smith, who I didn't even put in my rankings. His projected rank is 136. Maybe he'll slip into the 130s in my updated ranks, but his ADP rank is 72nd. So there's a big market oopsie disagreement there. Hurston Waldrep is second. He's in this episode. Trevor Rogers right there, projected rank 100, ADP rank 72, and because I am a reasonable person that is not just a computer spitting out a number, I put Rogers. Where is he?
Oh, the crowd groans.
I put Rogers 65.
You've conformed to the masses.
Yeah, but not all the way. It's actually kind of silly because a 65 rating is pretty much a don't buy, because if he's going where he's going, then
you've moved him up because other people like him a lot more than you, but now they still like him more than you.
Yeah, so it's silly. It's a projections game. It's a whatever. It's a nod towards the fact that the markets like him more, but I just don't like him as much as the markets. Kris Bubic is next. Andrew Abbott. I mean, these are all the guys we talk about all the time. Merrill Kelly, Shota Imanaga, and then Cade Horton at the end. I did just get my first share of Cade Horton. We'll talk about him later. He might be my favorite on this list of players that the market likes more. I usually try to avoid players like this just because, I hew close to the projections and, I don't know. The markets are often right, so I don't want to just say this is a list of players you should avoid completely, but I don't end up with as many shares when the market's this far off the projections.
Well, there's just some things about Rogers' season last year that makes it extra tricky. It's that it was 109 and two-thirds innings, and within that you had 84.2% left on base percentage, by far the best of his career, more than 12 points above his previous norm. The home run rate was as good as it's been since 2021, 0.49 homers per nine. His career rate's 0.83 homers per nine, so you're probably going to have to push that back closer to the 0.8, or at least one homer per nine is what the projections throw out there, but at least go back closer to the career rate. And the K rates were much better than the projections are suggesting. So you have to give up something. And there's BABIP too, 226 BABIP last year.
I mean, all of the things are screaming.
All the things are saying pull him back, pull him back, pull him back. And I think the way he would beat the projections is if everything normalizes for him in terms of batted ball data and left on base percentage, but the K rate holds. That's kind of the secret to him ending up being fine.
Here's a weird thing about the K rate. You know that he threw 32 and two-thirds innings in the minor leagues last year?
I had not remembered that, but I guess he was stuck as an extra guy for a while.
He had a 5.51 ERA, a 1.56 whip, and a 19.9% K rate. So all of that is weird. Also, on top of that, 24. Okay, it's not that far off. His career rate 23.5. Last year 24.3. So not too far off his career. You could look at this just to play devil's advocate from the hey, he just returned to grace. He got back some of the velo he lost, almost a full tick, and he's more like he was back in. You got to go all the way back to 2021 to find the good Trevor Rogers, basically. But another thing I'd like to point out is in 2021 he threw 94.6, and I don't think he's going to throw 94.6 again. So I think it's going to be a low 4s ERA myself, with he has a poor whip for his career, so I would expect a poor whip, and I would expect a below-average strikeout rate.
Well, if those are your expectations, you're going somewhere else in this tier.
Yes,
I know you've liked Edward Cabrera for a long time. That was a good call last year, I think, relative to past performances. He gets traded to the Cubs, stays in a pitcher-friendly environment, returned from a late-season arm injury scare to show he was healthy before winter was here, so I think that's a little bit of a good sign, even though he's got a pretty lengthy history of arm trouble on the ledger. Most importantly, last season, he dropped the walk rate down to 8.3%. That was the first time in parts of 5 MLB seasons that he's been under 11%. That was my concern. It's just like, I didn't think he'd ever get the control to a level where he'd be consistently viable. And it happened, at least for 1 year. So the stuff's always been electric. There were some adjustments made in Miami last year. Do you think he can avoid more injuries after putting up a career-high 137 2/3 innings around that IL stint last year?
I think this arm slot is just more natural for him. In 2024, he threw 9% sinkers with the old arm slot, and he actually had better location numbers on it than the four-seam. So I wonder if that played into it, where they said, man, you just locate that sinker better. Maybe that's your natural pitch. He drops the arm angle. He leans into the sinker. He threw the sinker more than the four-seam last year. His velo goes up. Used the four-seam more as an action pitch, the sinker more as a strike pitch. And that's why if you look at each of the numbers, you say, oh my God, his sinker got pummeled. Why is this a good idea? Well, first of all, fastballs do much worse than other pitches. So if you're comparing a slugging percentage on a fastball to, a slugging percentage on a slider, you shouldn't do that. They're just not on the same scale. And secondly, his other pitches are so good that he has to throw something in counts where he needs a strike. And he doesn't really have other things, even as far as he pushed his command. He doesn't really have other things. So basically, he's throwing a lot of those sinkers 3-0, 2-0, times when the hitter knows it's coming. Yeah, so the slugging's going to be a little bit high. I tend to think that these are good pitches. 100 stuff plus on a sinker is pretty good. It may be less than you expect with a 97, 98 mile an hour fastball, but it's a good. I think it's a good enough fastball. That sinker is. His secondaries are really good. So from a stuff angle, I'm in. From a newfound command thing, I think there's a reason to believe that Edward Cabrera's newfound command is real, because he just basically found a new slot and used a different fastball that he commanded better in the past. So all those things are a go for me. The thing that's not a go for me is he had a forearm strain, dude. A strain is a tear. He had an elbow strain. An elbow strain is a tear. It's not, there are obviously degrees, but he tore his elbow. I'm a little surprised he passed all the physicals and the Cubs took this shot. So maybe they say that it looks fine, but I don't know what number to put next to him for innings next year is what I'm saying.
Probably 120 or 130. I mean, if he's healthy, 150's possible, but given the past history, you can't possibly put that down as the actual, most likely sort of outcome. I mean, the Cubs did get him
from
for
141 to 135 to appease you. The
part of the gamble.
Oh no!
The groan when you agree with me. I think the problem I see with Edward Cabrera too is just they may have made that trade thinking about the long term as much as the short term, and obviously he had to check out okay for them to make this trade, but this was not the first time he hurt his arm. That's the problem for me. So I think he fits into our extremely high risk bucket. I think the good news is, compared to some of the guys we talked about on part 2 of our starting pitcher preview, you're getting Cabrera 50 to 75 picks later. So the risk is a little bit softer when you're at this part of the draft board. So I think it's okay. I think there's a couple guys that go in this group, one in particular that I'm a little bit more likely to draft, who's also risky, but I feel like it's a lower volume of arm problems that we're talking about, and we'll get to that pitcher in just a moment. But we got a teammate of Edward Cabrera here, a new teammate. Shota Imanaga is here with a really unusual path, right? He had options that were declined, and that lined him up for free agency. Then he was tendered the qualifying offer. He decided to take that, so he returned to the Cubs for one more year. Had a hamstring injury that kind of split his season in half. didn't look right after the injury, which could be the reason. Like, that could be most of it. And then there could be a little bit of a increased familiarity from opposing hitters from this being his second year in the big leagues, where maybe some of the ride on his fastball is less deceptive because it's been to the league a few more times, right? So I'm kind of curious what you have for Imanaga on your projections right now too, because I look at him as maybe more of like a whip play, okay ERA, really good whip, and maybe kind of a lowish strikeout rate sort of guy, but kind of trending into the be a little bit careful with some of the road starts territory based on what we saw last year.
You're right that the hamstring may have done something. Shota Imanaga had a closer to 92 mile an hour fastball before the hamstring injury and closer to a 90 mile an hour fastball after the injury. It's hard to know what his fastball velocity will be, and that will be really important because the fastball really got destroyed in the second half. And you know, that's the risk there is that, you know, once Wrigley warms up, he's going to once again, like he did last year, have a second half split that includes 2.4 homers per nine in the second half. And that's a lot of fastball dirtiness there. In terms of what I have for innings, I think that's another a good question for this. I have a 149. That feels like I want to revise that down right now live on the show as well, because he had 144 last year. He had the injury. He's only a little bit older. He is going down to 134. And the other thing I just wanted to point out, and I pointed this out before, but I think it's worth it. Not everyone listens to every show. That he is a over 30-year-old who had a 5 percentage point drop in his strikeout rate. And I looked at all the guys since 2015. There's a feature on Fangraphs where you can look at the year-to-year changes in a stat. And so I just looked at guys who had I think 120 or 130 innings in both seasons, looked at guys whose K percentage dropped 5 percentage points and who were over 30. I found 12 guys who were who you could, you know, a couple of the guys are still in it. So Garrett Cole had this, but I think it was injury related, and I can't tell you what the rest of his career looks like yet. Kevin Gossman has had this at some point in his career. So those are good names, right? There's 12 names where I can sort of I can tell you, I can give you a verdict. 12 guys had this before. They were 30 years old and had a 5 percentage drop. 9 of them were never useful again in fantasy. 9 of the 12.
Not great.
And of those 9, more than half were just retired. That was it. That was the end. So Marco Estrada was just done. Anibal Sanchez was just done. Masahiro Tanaka, when this happened, just went back to Japan. Then you have guys who had a half another good season. Jeremy Hellickson, Corey Kluber, half of one more good season. Then you had guys that were done for fantasy. Andrew Kashner was done. James Shield was below replacement after that happened. Jay Happ was done for fantasy. Marco Gonzalez was done for fantasy. So basically you really have 2 good names. Mike Fiers had 2 more good seasons, and Cole Hamels had 2 more good seasons. So, hey, you know, if Shota has a decent year this year, sell in keeper leagues if he has any value. I mean, that's the one thing. But then the other one is, I think, do not draft. I don't know if it's like do not draft with capital letters. There's always a case where I have 1 share of him in AutoNew. It was at a decent price, and I thought, you know, I'll cut him for money if I need to later, you know. But, you know, I wish I hadn't kept him. Actually, I wish I had that money back now. And I would say 9 out of 12 is a bad ratio.
I think where he lives in terms of fastball velocity, though, that tick makes a really, really big difference. So if that comes back, I could see maybe just a slight return in the K rate. Maybe he splits the difference between the 25% from his first season with the Cubs and the 20.6% that we saw last year. I think that's sort of what you're hoping for if you want to believe. Again, I think at the very least, you're getting a home streamer for a good chunk of the season, and I think there's a chance you get more. So I like Shota a little more than Eno does at this point. Eno is probably going to continue steering away. Shane Baz goes in this range. He is one of my favorites in this particular pocket. he wasn't exactly dominant away from home last year. The Rays, of course, played their home games at Steinbrenner Field, as we've been talking about. But it was a 3.86 ERA on the road, 3.03 WOBA allowed. I think that's a better baseline expectation for him overall, because when you look at his home splits at Steinbrenner Field, 5.90 ERA, 18 of his 26 homers allowed. I think there's some glimmers of hope, though, if you look closely. Think about him now getting traded to Baltimore. 17.8% K-minus BB percentage in the second half. It's not necessarily more meaningful because it happened in the second half, but I bring it up because it just means he was further away from surgery. Like, even the first run we saw from him with the Rays in 2024 coming off TJ, the stuff wasn't quite the same. The results were really good. It was a 3.06 ERA and a 1.06 whip. That didn't seem quite right for the way he was attacking hitters. I think we started to see a little bit more pre-injury Boz in the second half of last season.
Yeah, there was also a significant change to his mix over that time frame. He went and switched to a cutter from the slider, and if you look at his Stuff Plus or anything, and you say, like, why would that be a good choice? Because the slider looks good in the model. The problem is he just can't command it. He can't command that slider. And what happened was, like, just look at this chart. This is his slider usage chart from last year. It's down the pipe. Like, I have no other way. Like, you don't even. I'm showing the chart on YouTube just so people can see it. You on the radio, don't worry about it. It's down the middle. Imagine a red thing down the middle. That's his slider. Like, it's not where sliders go. It doesn't go down. And you saw this where, he developed a homer problem. He was throwing these sliders thigh high right across the middle. He just couldn't command it the way he needed to. And so he turfed it for a pitch that just went to where he wanted it to go, up and into lefties. Gave him, two options against lefties. I think against righties, he may... I don't know what he will do. Maybe he'll use some right-on-right changes. Maybe just being fastball, curveball against righties is good enough. But I like him. All the numbers away from home are better. The K-minus BB away from home is better. There's a change in his pitch mix here, and I think there's a real opportunity here to do a YOLO yo-yo, which is. The idea is to pair guys in tiers. If you want to take two guys out of this tier, you don't take Boz and Cabrera. That's just YOLO. I think you take one of Boz and Cabrera, and you take one of some of the veterans we're just about to talk about. So somebody like, Shane Bieber is next up on the list, and I recognize that there's maybe some injury risk there, so maybe it's Aaron Nola who's the next one on the list. But there's really an opportunity here for a YOLO yo-yo where you take the upside with Boz, you take the innings with your next pick.
Yeah, I think Bieber added the kick change, looked really good overall coming off TJ at the end of last year. Stayed with Toronto. I thought he was going to test the market. I'm just wondering how healthy he is. The rumblings around his arm health have been a little bit concerning this offseason, so maybe it's more of waiting until spring training starts and just seeing where he is in terms of his throwing schedule to make sure he's on track with everybody else before drafting him. So I've been a little bit hesitant to add Bieber to my builds with that particular uncertainty, since he seemed fine at the end of the year, and now they're making it seem as though he's not.
There's a question of if he's ready for opening day, which just sucks if you're especially if you're trying to do the YOLO yo-yo. You just want to be like, no, I want a guy who's there for me on day one. And day one, just, I don't know if it has outsized import to us. Maybe, there's other guys who will miss the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks of the season. You don't even think about it. Chris Sale did this a couple times where people thought he had a full season that was healthy, and you're like, no, he missed the last month of the season. But so the shape of the season does matter, at least in terms of vibes. But if you just put Shane Bieber down for 130, 140 innings, you're still going to get your innings. It's just not going to be at the beginning, if that's how you think of it. I like that you mentioned the changeup. Here's a chart of his vertical movement on his changeup. He gained 4 or 5 inches of drop going to that. So I think this kick change is the best changeup of his career. And I think that's kind of an important thing for him to do at this stage of his career, being 30 and coming off of surgery. But the last thing I want to mention about Shane Bieber is just that when I mentioned that Tatsuya Imai's contract was a data point in how we should evaluate him, I think Shane Bieber opting in or taking this part of this contract should also be considered a data point, and probably not a positive one. I mean, if he thought everything was cool, he could have done better than the sort of $15 million he opted into or whatever it was. And he could have, like, if you'd asked me before that news came out, I would have thought, he's going to go back out there and he's going to get a big deal. He's going to get 5 for 100 or something.
Right. I think that decision paired with that uncertainty is the thing that's making me nervous, because if he had a clean bill of health, I'd be looking at Bieber as a clear better option than Aaron Nola as a toss-up here, and I imagine the market would be treating Bieber differently. He'd go 10 or 15 spots earlier among pitchers, right? He would have been up a tier or two from where he is right now. So I just want to see a little bit more news-wise and get a sense of where Bieber's really at when pitchers and catchers report here in the next couple of weeks. Aaron Nola, every other year pattern is super weird. He's got the Logan Webb big volume ratios downside problem. Like when it goes sideways and you're leaving him in for all those starts, you can take on a lot of water in those categories. But he's had some monster years where everything's clicked. To me, it feels a little bit like 2025 Kevin Gausman. Health finally betrayed Aaron Nola last season, 94 and a third innings after being just a workhorse the previous 4 seasons. He was 180 plus each of those 4 years, got the 205 back in 2022. I think we're at the point in his career, K rates kind of settle in that lower mid 20% range, 24% in back-to-back seasons. That's fine. He's got good control. I think he owns a home run problem. That's partially a function of his home park and just kind of a function of his stuff at this point. Is this good oatmeal with Aaron Nola at this price, or is this actually a problematic oatmeal if he loses another tick? 'Cause I've always looked at him as a wide arsenal guy with command that can kind of finesse his way around the deterioration of his stuff.
Yeah, funnily enough, the every other year pattern, which is just so bizarre and is obviously unscientific, does fit hand in glove with his Stuff Plus. So in his good years, he's had Stuff Pluses over 110, and his bad years has been under 110. That's bad news if you're thinking about aging. But it could suggest that maybe the optimal strategy with Aaron Nola is to get a sense of how he's looking in the spring. I know that sounds stupid, but if it's just looking better, maybe that's the key for him. Maybe breathless reporting on what his fastball velocity is in the spring will matter here. I mean, he was down to 91.8 last year with the fastball, and so it's not too surprising he had the worst home run rate of his career. That's just what happens when guys drop that low. This is beginning to be, a problem. If he can sit 92 plus in the spring, I will feel a little better about him, because then I would assume he can sit more 92.5. When he slid 92.6 in 2024, Aaron Nola had a 3.57 ERA. So I am taking my shots at him. I've taken him in some draft and holds where I just like that. I assume that there'll be a good amount of innings there. I think in a main event or like a league that has a waiver wire, I may not be as into Aaron Nola, because I think you're right. I think there must be. I can't keep up with all of Nick Pollock's names, but it's the roster headache. I forget what the nickname was for that, but it's that thing where it's like the guy's too good to drop, and you're like, he's too good to drop, but he's on my bench and I don't know when to use him. Like, I could see a situation where you get into Nola and he's got like a 4.7 ERA in April. Like, what do you do with that? Are you dropping him? You're trying to read the tea leaves on the stuff, and so I'm not sure.
Is that a Toby that you're looking for? A Toby is a middling pitcher who has little upside but a steady enough floor that you may earn a spot in your roster just for some stability, but is to be avoided against tougher matchups. The guy who goes to work every day and gets the job done, but he's super boring and you don't like to talk to him ever. So you're not putting a Toby tag on him yet.
Not a Toby. There's another one that's more about being a headache, where it's rosterable, but it's a hard roster decision. But in any case, I do see a case for a Nola Boz connection. I think that would be an interesting way to take two different shots, completely different shots, two different bites at the apple, from two different areas.
I mean, I think the glossary picture list is 10 times bigger than the last time I looked at it. It's ridiculous. I can't even track it down. Right
Hard
now.
at work.
No, yeah. Just, hey, it's good. You make those references, haven't been an easy to look up sort of place. So Eno can figure that one out a little bit later on in the show. But I keep taking that chance on Nola in draft and hold season as well. I wonder if my tune will change once we get into the leagues where you're making actual cuts, because it seems like a pretty good price. If you believe you can bounce back and be a fringy top 100 overall guy this time next year, you're getting him close to pick 200 as things stand right now.
The nice thing, too, is that, it isn't a question of, will he be in the big leagues or will he have a job or, any of that stuff. It's more just a question of how good he's going to pitch. Sometimes you have these multiple questions. Will he be good? Will he be in the big leagues? Will he have a job? Will he have innings? Will he be hurt? Most of the questions he says yes. We just don't know about the will he be good.
That is a huge question, but the odds and evens, we're in an even-numbered year. That suggests that Aaron Nola will be good. And sometimes
this next year,
just that simple.
I'm tempted to just be like, I'm out.
Yeah, this could be a completely avoidable group. Let's take a look at this group. ADP Tier 5A, as we're calling it, between picks 200 and 225. That's Carlos Rodón, Zach Gallen, Cade Horton, Andrew Abbott, Kris Bubic, Jack Flaherty, and Merrill Kelly. Yeah, it's bad. I think if you said, who are you taking out of this group? I'm taking the first guy, maybe, because I think Carlos Rodón is still really good when he's healthy. Recovering well from surgery to remove a bone spur from his pitching elbow. Probably going to pitch a little bit in Grapefruit League, but behind the other Yankee starters. So, late April, early May is the likely timetable. And he was just great in the regular season again. 3.09 ERA, 105 whip. I mean, a huge discount because of the injury. Projections say he's going back to the 2024 levels, which is still actually a pretty good value given the strikeouts he brings to the table if he is in fact healthy and on that sort of timetable where he only misses maybe 3 or 4 weeks of the regular season once the games start to count. Yeah,
I don't like surgery, but this is one of those smaller surgeries. It's not as big a deal, and Cashman's saying that there have not been any surprises so far in Rodón's rehab. So I like that. This might be an opportunity to buy where people are worried he won't be ready for opening day, but he's just ready 2 weeks later. I think, his first appearance in the Cactus League will make me feel better. I think this is one of those guys that I draft in my last league. You know what I mean? Or if his price is suppressed in an AL only, I'd love it. If I have an IL slot, this is actually a pretty good time to take a guy that you would stash in your IL slot. And he would be probably the best one because as, you'll hear from Jeff Zimmerman later, we're getting into the territory where half of these guys that you're drafting don't make it to the end of your roster. So the end of the season. So Rodón would if he was healthy.
Yeah.
So
clearly in when healthy. I think that's the key. How good do you have to be? Clearly good when healthy to be worthy of the IL spot.
Yeah, and I think Rodón is a good stash on the IL. I think he is my favorite in terms of talent on this list. Zach Gallen is the next guy on the list, and Gallen. There's some certain things to like about what he did. Like he was better in the second half, basically. His velo drop was small, not that big a deal, and 93.5 for last year, 93.6 for his career. So he's been pretty steady at this 93 level. Sometimes he comes in cold in April and in spring training, but it seems like he eventually gets there. His K minus Bibee wasn't great. His Ks are dropping year over year for 3-4 years in a row now. But he's making some adjustments. He's dialing down the four seam over time. He threw the changeup a lot more in September, fiddles around with the cutter from time to time. I like that it's a wide arsenal, that he's bounced back in the past. And I'd love to know where he was pitching before I took him. But, let me put it to you this way. If you had to choose between Gallen and Nola bouncing back, which one would you take?
It's a great question. I think I'm more inclined to actually take Nola of the two. The highs are a little higher in some senses. I think the quality of the team's a little more steady for me. Diamondbacks are maybe still a wild card team. Phillies could still be a division-winning type team, so a little bit of a gap in terms of quality. Who's protecting your leads? Who's putting runs on the board? It's close.
He may go back to the Diamondbacks because of the qualifying offer situation. That's the most recent rumor. I think if he did go back, that would be a decent landing spot for him. At least there's familiarity.
Yeah, and I think if you want to look for some signs that things were a little weird with Gallen last year, 1.45 homers per nine. That was his highest home run rate since 2021. He was under 1 homer per nine each of the previous 3 seasons, so probably a little bit of bad luck on the long balls. 67.6% left on base percentage. Every year of his career, he's been 73.1% or higher. The career mark's about 75%. So a couple of things just went wrong at the exact worst times for Gallen. The second half adjustments look like they're real to me. I do think a high 3s ERA, 120s whip is very doable for him again. Back-to-back seasons with a 126 whip. Keep that in mind, though, too. It's a little bit of a liability in that category. Even back in 2021, it was a 129. So you're not necessarily getting a plus contribution in that category in a typical year, but I think he can be a little bit better than the ERA projections suggest, especially if he lands in a neutral or pitcher-friendly environment. How about Cade Horton, kind of bounced back from what I would say was a disappointing 2024 in the minors to earn his promotion, pitched really well for a midsummer stretch with the Cubs, was actually, depending on where you slice the player rater for certain segments of time, was the best pitcher in fantasy, just based on roto value, which underlying numbers didn't support, but it was obviously a big boost for the Cubs to have that kind of quality in their rotation. Came with a lower than expected strikeout rate, 64 to 19 strikeouts to walks, with a 136 ERA over 73 innings. Just absurd, right? The four-seamer doesn't really move a lot on the arm side. It's kind of funny. I think that's part of why hitters might handle that pitch pretty capably. But I'm intrigued at this point. I think there's still the possibility that Cade Horton's making adjustments, finding his way, realizing that four-seamer, which may have been a bigger part of his arsenal in the past, in college, can't be used quite the same way in the big leagues.
Yeah, just if you want to follow along here, if you're watching, right now up on the chart is up on the screen is his pitch movement chart with his arm angle, and he's a little bit over the top, but not extreme in any way. And he throws a cut ride four seam, and you can see that four seam basically has 0 horizontal movement. The average four seam has 8 to 10 inches of horizontal movement. You can see that in the shaded red portion. So it is a weird fastball. He started adding a little bit of a sinker, and that too had a little cut on it. I talked to him about that changeup. He thought he was dialing in the changeup over time, and that in fact, being a supinated bias guy, which means that he's better at coming down on the sort of on the outside of the ball, if you can imagine it. He's sort of he cuts the ball well. He's on that side of the ball, as opposed to like a changeup guy who's on the inside of the ball. He thinks he can find, with seamstress wake, he can find ways to cut the ball and still get a changeup movement. And I think that changeup could actually work for him. You wouldn't play the sinker off the changeup. You'd play the sinker and you play the four seam and the changeup off each other. There's a big movement differential there. And then the sweeper has a little bit unexpected movement, as you'd want from a sweeper. Like, it stays above the 0 line while his curve goes below the 0 line. I kind of like this pitch movement chart. I'm not going to lie. And it is a pitch movement chart that they like. And there's some evidence that the Brewers like something similar. The Brewers have now added a cutter that has a lot of ride. What does that sound like? A cut ride fastball? So the all of the guys that have come recently to the Brewers or come up through their system, almost all of them have this high ride cutter. that Corbin Burns had. So there's a godfather for this. But Chad Patrick has it. Quinn Priester added it. He didn't even have a cutter before he got there. So there's something going on between the Brewers and the Cubs here where they've maybe identified a shape. Maybe it's even out in front of stuff models. We did the stuff model refresh, and Cade Horton still doesn't pop in the model in any way. But I'm willing to say this is interesting to me. It has worked so far. It could be the type of thing where it just creates ground balls or creates soft movement that works when you are in Wrigley and you have great defense behind you. It could be something about the way the batted balls fit the defense behind him. I'm willing to bet on him a little bit. I know that my rankings will upset some people that are really into Cade Horton, where I have him 51. That just reflects the projections are for around a 4 ERA. It's not very exciting. But that 51 ranking puts him ahead of a lot of the people we're talking about right now. And if you ask me to buy one person in this group, it actually would be Cade Horton. I do have a couple shares of Cade Horton now, and I didn't think I would because you can point to the K-minus BB. It was below average. You can point to the strikeout rate. It was below average. You can point to the stuff lit. It was below average. But there's something intriguing about Cade Horton to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the scouting grades on his pitches, the pitch grades that Fangraphs had, good slider, at least an average curveball, good, possibly plus changeup, ample command, and then a fastball that is fine if he doesn't overthrow it, like he doesn't throw it too often. That all gets you kind of excited too. We like the home park, we like the defense, and I think compared to the other guys going just after him, you feel like growth potential is the more likely direction. If things are going to change, if he's going to improve underlying skills, like it makes more sense to see that.
The curve and change were getting better over the course of the year last year. So, yeah, I think that the secondaries are just going to, because you can imagine that somebody who throws 96 with good command of the fastball probably just carved up and good command of a weird-looking fastball, he probably just carved up the minor leagues with the fastball. So right. Now he has to develop the secondary stuff, and I see enough there that I think I like him.
Yeah, it seems pretty important to the Cubs, too, so we'll dig into that more probably on our Cubs team preview here in a couple of weeks. Andrew Abbott goes in this range, 413 2/3 big leagues innings, 4.42 SIERA, 3.42 ERA. Projections all call for correction. Zips does throw a 3.80 ERA and 1.23 whip out there, which would be nice if he does it for 160 plus innings on a at least 500-ish sort of team. Maybe the Reds could be a playoff team again this year. Career 22% K rate is one of your limited ceiling things if you're in a league that has an innings cap. Abbott becomes even more risky in those situations. He has been a puzzle for us his entire time in the big leagues, and growth in the career year last year came in the form of a career best walk rate, which if he sustains that will help his chances of getting crushed when the weather warms up in Cincinnati and some of those fly balls start landing in the bleachers. So have you come around on Andrew Abbott as someone you actually like to put on your teams, or are you willing to just be wrong again based on our original takes on him?
I just want to point out one thing. It's not that Stuff Plus hates Andrew Abbott. It's that every model hates Andrew Abbott. I just have to point
which might be a good thing. Maybe it's just so different that it's weird. That's the Lodum
the truest Lodum. Well, I mean, I would love to say that it's so different and so weird, but when I look at his movement charts or whatever, I don't see any of that. He has almost exact average movement. In fact, yes. Let's put this chart up on the screen so people can know what I'm talking about. When you go over to Savant, they have shading where the MLB average is, and his four seam is exactly average. It's just right there on the average. And his sweeper is pretty much average. His curveball's a little weird, I guess, but and his changeup is kind of like a riding changeup, but I don't think that. You don't ask people why Andrew Abbott is hard, and they say it's changeup. SIERA, a 4.20 SIERA last year on a 2.87 ERA. Strikeout minus walks. He had a 15.5, 14.3 or so was average, so just slightly above average. What else do I FIP 366? That's not bad, but that's mostly due to decent home run suppression. xERA 358. Okay, so maybe not every model hates him. If you want to buy him, at least buy him on the Zips price. Put the Zips price in a calculator and push that one out. Don't buy him just willy-nilly thinking, he's going to... I don't even think he'll pitch to that 342 career ERA. And I know that lefties outperform models, but in the model refresh, lefties did better. And he's still not coming out looking that much better. And so I'm just going to be in a void. I also think that when things go wrong for a Reds pitcher, it can go really wrong. It's not a forgiving place.
I think what we saw in the first 2 seasons informs us a lot about his true talent level in terms of results, right? A high 3 ERA seems like a reasonable, I'm going to beat the indicators. I'm going to beat it by a quarter run, maybe a half run.
And a really
not
high
a full
whip.
Run.
130 whip in both those years. And both of the years, the 2023 and 24, both ended in semi-disaster with the last few starts, just a bunch of homers and then some sort of injury or something happened, So I would tell people to look at the game logs for 23 and 24.
I wonder if you get to the point in 12-team leagues where you say, I'll use him as my last pitcher or one of my last pitchers, and then I'll cut him in about middle of June in a 12-team league, even though the ratios might look really good at the time because the weather will warm up and start to, I think most people are going to see it coming, but yeah, I can't get there. I like surprises though, so I'll continue to be wrong about Andrew Abbott. That's fine. Kris Bubic goes in this range too. This is actually a big year for him. He's a free agent after 2026. The velo dropped below where it was in 2024. He was working out of the pen coming off TJ, so that's not a big surprise. Still better than his pre-injury levels, though. Has 4 pitches for hitters on both sides of the plate. And in the past, he had more of a ground ball tilt. But expectations here, I think, are probably a big volume inning, or big volume season, innings-wise, to really drive up his value on the market. So I wonder if he's going to value efficiency per inning a little bit more than trying to rack up Ks. It's kind of an interesting toss-up, kind of a dilemma for him, because it's 24.4% last year seems about as good as it's going to get for a strikeout rate anyway with that stuff. And then it's hard to look at that alongside an 8% walk rate and expect anything close to a sub-3 ERA again.
Yeah, I do think that if I was forced to choose between Bubic and Abbott, these overperforming lefties, I think I would take Bubic.
I would for sure.
The K-Bibee was better. The Sierra was better. The xERA was better. And then if you look at this on the stuff refresh, he doesn't pop overall, but the 4-seam 100 stuff plus, that's actually better than average for a 4-seam. The changeup 96, that's around average for a 4-seam. The sweeper 95 stuff plus, really weird pitch. Does not look good in the model, performs well on the field, and I think it's because people expect the changeup. I think he's tunneling the sweeper and the changeup off of each other. He kind of like Trevor Rogers was talking about doing, where the sweeper and the changeup arrive at similar places but with different movement, and you can kind of play them off each other. Where, hey, that's slowing outside. Oh, I think it's a changeup. Oh crap, it's the sweeper. It came in, called strike, right? So if it's a changeup and you're a righty, then it's going away from you and it's going to be a ball. So there's a possibility he's got something figured out there where he's playing those 2 pitches off each other, but they're near average overall by stuff plus, and then sinker 95 stuff plus, that's actually average-ish. So the slider does not look good in the model, but he has good command of it. I mean, he has good command of the sweeper, and he has good command of the 4-seam. So there's pretty good command here overall. There's a pretty wide mix that maybe he's figured out how to play them off of each other. I am a little worried that the park is changing in the midst of all this for Kris Bubic. So I don't love him, and I don't think I probably have him ranked as a place where people will just say it's a no draft. But actually, no. I mean, I have him 64. So I think that's in this mix right here. It's a couple after Jack Flaherty. It's before you. It's right around Trevor Rogers. It's before you get into the sleepers, and it's ahead of Shota Imanaga. So I like Kris Bubic a little bit.
think I'm a little intrigued by the fact that he had a 13.4% swinging strike rate. I mean, earlier I said I'm not expecting much more than a 24% K rate, but
that's a pretty good number for that strikeout rate.
Yeah, he gets enough whiffs where it's not out of the question. So I don't know. Maybe he'll come back with something slightly different. I'm going to keep an eye on him pretty closely this spring. I do like him more than Abbott. Definitely like him more than Flaherty and Kelly. I think you're kind of shopping for different things looking at Bubic versus Horton, I guess. Like, do you want some ceiling or do you feel better about the floor? That's the way I would look at them. But at price, no problem with Kris Bubic whatsoever, especially. Jack Flaherty, skeptics entering last season were right. Another healthy-ish season was nice to see, but the results were disappointing. Sierra says he was actually unlucky. 367 Sierra compared to a 464 ERA. Do you think there's any way you could add another fastball to keep hitters from just teeing off on that four-seamer? They slugged 444. 13 of the homers he allowed last year came against the four-seamer. He's got 2 breaking balls. Should keep the whiffs coming at a decent rate, but this just feels like a strikeouts play where the ratios can be pretty bumpy and there's still a less than stellar track record of staying healthy for Flaherty.
Yeah, he's reduced his fastball usage over time. He used to have a sinker, Jack Flaherty did. He used to be, kind of fastball slider, and that's pretty much it. But the knuckle curve has really come on. That's something I think the Dodgers brought to him to really throw the knuckle curve more. I think he can play those 2 pitches off each other, but we used to trot out the old Jack Flaherty stat about how good he was above 94 and how bad he was below 94. He is comfortably below 94 now, and I just wonder if that's just going to inform his home run rate going forward. Here's one of the few pitchers where I just don't know if I believe the oopsie. And, he's got a 3.79 projection from oopsie, and I'm more in line with the Zips 414. I think this is just aging. And to be honest, take all the peripherals away and just look at 3 out of the last 4 seasons. There's a point at which, you get it off sample, you can look at ERA a little bit. He had basically like a 4.5 ERA in all years that weren't 2024 since 2022, right? And even his good year in 2021 was in 78 innings. So, I don't know. I know that there's good years in there, and 2018 and 2019 in St. Louis were great, but I feel like those are a long time ago. We're reaching back too far if that's really informing our model right now. I'm looking at 3 of the last 4 years basically unusable in fantasy, and maybe this year if I take him, it's because Oopsie says I should, and because I feel like I could pitch him at home. That'd be basically it.
Yeah, I'm probably out on Flaherty if the price holds where it is. If he fell 50 picks or something, then sure, that home streamer use case makes sense. You could also cut him at this price point and just say, I'm moving on to someone more interesting at some point, but generally not someone I've been targeting. Merrill Kelly, discounted old guy in this group, got 2 years, $40 million to stay in a familiar place. Sub 120 whip now in 4 consecutive seasons. Pretty impressive. I think it's a 3.52 ERA or lower in 3 of those 4 years, and the 1 year where he was above it was only 73 2/3 innings because of an injury. So I wonder, it's not a great profile in terms of Ks, but is this just a capable veteran that chews up innings well and gets a little bit discounted because of his age?
Yeah, he has a terrible projection. It's it's not great stuff, and I feel like there's a little bit of a razor's edge for Merrill Kelly as he drops below 92 miles an hour here. Although he's lived there before, the year after his good thoracic outlet surgery, was also under 92, but that was his worst year in the big leagues. So I don't know how long he's going to continue to produce like this as his velo drops. If he's 91-1 this year or 91-3 or whatever, then I believe Oopsie when it says 4.35 ERA, 1.33 whip. I know that looks like a huge change, but we've seen seasons like this. Two of Merrill Kelly's seasons, 19 and 21, were like that, first of all. And then second of all, you have to do some sort of aging curve for a 37-year-old. And I think that the market tells you he gets a 2-year deal. Like no team wants to be stuck with the bad year, many of those bad years. So, I don't know. Do you think I'm too harsh on him? 93, maybe that's too low, but
He might be a little harsh. I understand the reasons for it, but I think he's got the arsenal and the command that makes sense for a pitcher his age. Like, he's got that crafty veteran approach, right? It's 6 different pitches. It's a nice low slot. He's moved away from the four-seamer a little bit. Like, it's just all the things you'd want to see someone do to adjust over the course of their career. He's done it. So I don't think you're excited about it, but if you've been kind of aggressively YOLOing your way through the other tiers and need to start reining it in a little bit with a couple of veterans, I think Kelly can fit the build. I don't think there's anything wrong with where he's going right now. He's not the kind of guy you're ever going to intentionally target at this stage. But I think being that good in whip for several years makes him a little bit underrated in some circles.
I think, generally for my strategy in these tiers so far, I mean, the first tier, there were some players I wanted. Like, I wouldn't mind getting Edward Cabrera, Tanner Bibee. I have some Tanner Bibee shares, Shane Boz. I have some Aaron Nola shares. That first tier was interesting. I have some Bieber shares. These other tiers, I'm more willing to just put them in a sack and do some other stuff for a while. The way I do it is, I've talked about this a lot, is just, put the ones I like out of this group on a queue. I'm sure that I can, if I put Bubic and Horton and Rodón and Gallen and, some of the guys, the beginning of this next tier on a tier in my queue, and just waited for them to kind of whittle away, I'm sure I'd be happy with the worst of them, because in the meantime, I'm going and getting my second catcher, my MI, you know what I mean? Like, what are the would you rathers on Merrill Kelly when it comes to non-pitchers?
Oh, jeez.
Something
in this range,
I would like to know. Yeah,
like the pick 225 range. I think that's a really good way to think about it, just because pitching, I always feel like it tails off incrementally, whereas other positions just flat out drop off a cliff at various points.
You're getting close to a shelf when it comes sort of second base. Here we go. Matt McClanahan and Gleyber Torres are right there. But if you around Merrill Kelly, if you don't take those guys, then you're taking Simeon, who's old, or Donovan, Jimenez, like people who I guess Donovan's a pretty good one. I don't want to besmirch his name, but he's also not really played against left-handers, right? So you're getting into platoon utility, or players that might not just be good with a stick next year. I like Jimenez, but so there's a shelf there. If you're looking at first base, if you're lucky enough, you might find Wilson Contreras around there. But when we're talking about this tier in general, Wilson Contreras is one of the last first basemen you want. After that, you're choosing between Manzardo, Stewart, Steer, Berger. It gets bad after that. So, would I make sure I got Aaron Nola if Wilson Contreras is on the board? No, I'd probably take Wilson Contreras and say, if I get Flaherty instead of Nola, or I get Kelly instead of Nola, I'm not going to, cry myself to sleep tonight. Outfielders, it's a little bit more like pitchers where you can convince yourself I can wait a little bit, but I do see a little bit of a shelf here with Jordan Beck, Brian Reynolds, Elliot Ramos above Merrill Kelly, but behind him, TJ Friedel, Colton Cowser, Giancarlo Stanton. So, right? A little difference there where you got a lot of right-handers going to play all the time ahead of Merrill Kelly. And then behind him, you get some platoon lefties and stuff. So, I'm just shopping in hitters right now. I was like, when I was looking at this episode, I was like, why do we have a whole episode of pitchers I don't want? It's not quite like that.
Doing something else, yeah. You're just doing something else in your builds because you feel like you got enough early in your foundation. You're rounding out other parts of the roster, and you're coming back to pitching later with guys that are very similar to these guys that go 50 to 100 picks later. That's how it goes.
I feel like. I think episode 4, I'm going to be more like, aha, here's all the guys I'm taking. Like I said, I will. There is an idea out there that if you take too long between, if you just did 7 hitters in a row, then you've given up the chance to also get a pitcher that was good in there, and that you should kind of pair hitter pitcher. I do think it's fine to do 4 hitters in a row. I will get some FOMO when I'm doing hitters in this row, and I will jump in and get somebody. Like, if Boz is there, I'll jump in. If Horton drops, I'll jump in and get him. But generally I'm avoiding a lot of these players.
Yeah, I thought one of the things I noticed about the pool this year is between picks 200 and 300, there are not as many pitchers that I like as there have been in previous years.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just a weird thing that has been happening in drafts this year. Just the way the things have come together. Maybe it's a lot of guys coming off injuries or older guys that I don't trust.
It's like Quinn Priester. Like, do I want to bet on that big year? Casey Mize goes in here. Do I really want to bet on a guy after one good year?
So you may have heard the Super Bowl is coming up on Sunday. The Athletic Football Show has been on Radio Row all week. Robert, Dave, and Derek have had daily episodes, video breakdowns coming up. They got the Telestrator going out there, so a lot of great content coming out from them. Plus, they got a big recap episode coming out straight after the Patriots-Seahawks matchup on Sunday evening. Who's your Super Bowl pick, Eno?
Seahawks.
Yeah, same. I'm on
I
Seattle.
mean, I know it's chalk, but it's West Coast, and
I've seen enough Patriots Super Bowls in my lifetime. Sorry, Patriots fans. It's just a guess, pure gut. Last group for today. This is the pick 225 to 250 range, ADP tier 5B if you're keeping score at home. That's Matthew Boyd, Joe Musgrove, Shane McClanahan, Jack Leiter, Roki, Sasaki, Hurston, Waldrep, Bryce Miller, Connelly early, and Shane Smith. He made it in to episode 3. That's amazing. I'm glad he's here. He deserves it, man. He deserves flowers. We'll get to Shane Smith in a couple of minutes. So Matthew Boyd had his healthiest year since 2019. It was a great one. Missed a lot more bats way back then. 30% K rate. That was actually a Matthew Boyd skill at one point. It was a long time ago, but he did it. And this set of skills he has now works well as a back-end starter, especially in a pitcher-friendly environment like you have at Wrigley Field. 251 ERA at home, 390 on the road. So you have a little bit of that. Watch out for the tough matchups. That's natural at this part of the draft. You're not necessarily setting it and forgetting it with most of the guys you're drafting outside of the top 200 overall anyway. Are you worried about the second half fade? He had a 4.63 ERA in the second half, and I was just wondering if maybe fatigue started to catch up to him a little bit because of all the missed time in previous years. He kind of hit that spot July and August where his body was just starting to wear out.
Yeah, I was tempted to think that it was maybe a park factor thing where Wrigley warmed up and he started giving up homers. But when you mentioned that there was a shoulder bruise, something clicked for me because I was looking at all these charts and, stuff, velocity, spin, even his release point, they all changed in June. And then they were kind of back to normal near the end of the season. And one way we can show it, probably best is this ride chart. It shows Matthew Boyd's ride over the course of the season, and in that you can see the dip in June, and then you can see that he kind of recovered. What does that mean for me? I think he's a first half play. If you can manage to pick him and just play him in Wrigley in the cold, I still stick to this idea that early season Wrigley pitchers are a good play, and then if he's becomes more expendable, don't fall in love with him is what I'd say. I do like him a lot as a person, and he's a very nice dude. But I would say that with the injury history, with the park, with the way the season ended for him last year, even with the way the playoffs went for him, I'm just going to trust him as far as the last 3 starts, basically.
Yeah, I think if we saw a better swinging strike rate underneath that K rate drop, that could point to something a little better, sort of like we talked about with Bubic. It's just not there at 10.7%. I think your idea of using him early in the first half and then maybe getting away in the warmer months is probably a good way to go. It's a hard thing to do in a lot of leagues, to cut a player that's playing well. You have to have the right mentality to actually know when to pull the lever on something like that, but that seems like a pretty reasonable way to look at Boyd, given what we saw last year. Joe Musgrove, coming off of TJ, had that back in October of 2024, so he's going to be 18 months away from surgery almost when opening day rolls around at the end of March. The Padres have publicly stated there's no real innings restriction on Musgrove. I mean, I'm sure they'll do a little bit to help him, given that they've still got a few years left on a big deal they signed with him, but he's kind of important to the Padres getting where they want to go this year. 2 years left on that 5-year, $100 million deal he signed before 2023. Are you interested in Musgrove as a TJ returner for the reasons that A, it's 18 months instead of like 12 months removed from surgery, and B, he was running great control numbers really year in and year out before getting hurt, and a lot of times commands that last thing to come back. Does that give you some comfort in taking a chance on Musgrove at this price? Because this is a pretty nice discount for a guy that in his home park especially was spinning up really good ratios before he broke down.
Yeah, I feel like you can read it either way. This is really a weird one for me because we know that breaking ball command, in particular, is a little bit of a risk coming off surgery. And he throws like everything breaks. Like he throws 40, 60, 70% breaking balls. And I don't know, man. We talk all the time about how spinning it is so important for him. What did he do? Was it so long of a rehab that he's been throwing sliders for a while now and it's all good? But is it different to throw a slider in a training environment than it is to throw it in a game? Has he been throwing 90-mile-an-hour cutters or he's been throwing 87-mile-an-hour cutters? What is it like when he throws a 78-mile-an-hour slider? How does that feel? Is he commanding it the same way he throws an 83-mile-an-hour slider? Like, all these things are relevant to me, and I don't have a way of looking in and seeing it. So I know I appreciate what you're saying. I think I do like guys that did have good command before, but Ohtani never had good command, came back fine. Like, maybe the opposite is true. Like, this is another way of thinking. How about this? If you're a stuff guy who doesn't have great command, and you come back and you don't have great command, you know what you're doing. You're stuffing. Yeah. But if you're a guy who had great command, you come back and you don't have great command, you're not stuffing. So I think I'm a generally avoid on Musgrove. I like I said, I fall back on the thing that I just like to know that he threw. I would rather he came back late last year and threw.
I think there's some pitchers that can show us something in the spring, move up in price, and I'll still be drafting them. And I think Musgrove does not fit into that bucket. I'll take the blind chance on him now because the price is low enough. And if he moves up 50 or 75 picks because the velo's all back and it looks really good, then maybe I decide to back away. Because, the injuries before the full breakdown, it was 97 in the third innings back in 2023, 99 and two-thirds the last year we saw him in 2024. I don't know if they're going to go all the way back to workhorse mode. So I think he's okay. I think I'd expect something close to the projections. They're kind of high threes with a 120s whip, but if it takes him a few starts to knock off the rust, that could do a lot of damage. So your early season decision making is going to be really tough for Musgrove and might be informed based on what happens in Arizona during the spring too. So I feel like that's a little bit of a play in the middle, but I think you're getting enough of a discount right now where if you haven't taken on much pitching injury risk, it's fine to do it right now.
You can see why I might be piecing out on this tier in draft and hold season in particular, because you go from Boyd, who is maybe you think in your head, maybe I have to start. I'm going to use 50 or 60% of his starts. In a draft and hold, well, there are guys later like Landon Rope, there are all sorts of Giants type pitchers and other guys that you'd say the same for that you could take later. So, I could see okay. And then Musgrove, you're like, well, I don't even know how many innings I'm going to get. And then Shane McClanahan, 6 2/3 innings in rehab last year, the only game action he's had since 2023, due to his Tommy John. But then that was his second. But then he had a nerve issue in his triceps, which, they went information dark on us for a while with the nerve issue. Nobody knew what was going to is his career done? And then they thought that they maybe figured it out near the end of the season, and the news reports became a little bit more upbeat. But just putting it all together, you're like, I can't trust McClanahan at all for innings this year. So maybe that changes a little bit when main event season comes around, and I say, okay, I'm taking McClanahan or Musgrove as my SB6 or something, and if I drop him in second week of the season or whatever, I'm fine.
Yeah, I think you have to have the heart to just drop him if it doesn't look good. I want it to be a full recovery because I think Shane McClanahan pre-injuries is one of my favorite pitchers to watch. Just absolutely filthy out there.
Nasty.
The way that depth chart is built, which will come up more on the Rays preview, makes me think they're a little optimistic, at least as it stands on February 5th. But as we've said many times before, it might not be complete at this point. So he's
They don't have a ton of depth behind Boyle and Seymour. I mean,
not guys that are proven in the big leagues anyway, but maybe it's guys they like that they've developed something with. But I think if I was looking for a silver lining, they handled Drew Rasmussen really well. Rasmussen's had a bunch of injuries in his career, so that might give you an idea of like the best case scenario. Where
they also played with Rasmussen's innings and made it. There are times where he's not great fantasy useful wise. Like in a quality start league, I think I'd be pretty afraid of Shane McClanahan this year.
Yeah, that's true of most guys that have F health grades. Like you just wouldn't in the formats where volume's more important. You're just kind of scratching those guys off your list unless you're getting a crazy discount. Jack Leiter goes in this range. I think there's one downside of being 0 for on a player across all your leagues is that you can have a misguided perception of what that player actually did the previous year. 3.86 ERA, 1.28 WHIP, both a little better than I expected. If you'd asked me before this episode, what Leiter put up last year, I'd have said, I don't know, 4.3 and a 1.35. No, he was actually quite a bit better than that. Over 151 and 2/3 innings, too. The skills were more in line with the ratios that I threw at you, though. 22.9% K rate, 10.4% walk rate. But he should have the upper hand to be their number 4 starter. DeGrom, Eovaldi, Mackenzie Gore, and then Jack Leiter, likely their 4th starter. So is it just improving the command that's really the next frontier for him to either sustain the ratios he just had or possibly take another step forward?
I'm hoping that it's just solidifying the new arsenal that he showed over the course of the season. He really brought on the sinker in 2025 to the point where late in the season he's throwing it 15% of the time. He really, the kick change was a big deal for him. He was throwing that 16% of the time. So it's a wider arsenal than it's ever been. And that might have something to do with why the strikeout rate went down because maybe he was getting some more soft contact off of that kick change and off of that sinker. Though you look at his two halves, though, I kind of have the other end where I did have some shares and I did want Leiter to do well. And I did use him in the second half in particular and got some use out of him. But if you'd asked me, I would have said I thought his strikeout rate was better than 23%. That's league average. In the second half, when I was using him more, he had a 3.28 ERA. I'm putting up his two halves right now so you can see some splits. He had a 3.28 ERA and a 26% strikeout rate. That's the Jack Leiter I thought I'd see when I looked at his player page, right? And that's the Jack Leiter I've always wanted to see. And I thought this is the rival of Jack Leiter. This is a stuffist, like sort of figuring out the command and using his arsenal to make it all work. But then when you continue along, his stuff was down and his locations were down in the second half. So, did he find his command in the second half? Why did his walk rate go down if his locations weren't good? Was he just throwing the sinker in the middle of the zone? What here is sustainable? What isn't? The Sierra was a 4.43, not good. Strikeout minus walk rate, 13% below average. The BABIP and left on base percentage should go in the other direction and like regress in a way that's not good for him. Even Oopsie that likes him because of his stuff has a 4.08 ERA and a 1.31 WHIP. Even last year when he was good at a 1.28 WHIP for the season. Leiter for me is a shot in the dark. Maybe in this tier he makes sense because he's right next to McClanahan. It's a different kind of shot in the dark, but it kind of feels like that, where it's like, I don't know, there's some stuff here. He could make that one more tweak where it's like, bang, oh gosh, this is the Jack Leiter they drafted so high. This is why everyone was super excited about him. Or he could just sort of piddle along and not show great command and kind of do what he's doing. I like him better than McClanahan in a lot of ways because I'm like, well, at least the innings will be there. I think I could, play him half of his games at home. I could probably play him. That's a draft and hold thing I just told you, but in a league with a waiver wire, I'd probably take McClanahan. Like I said, I'm not taking a lot of shares of these guys. I might take one shot at this tier, and I might vary the shot so that I, in different leagues have taken different chances.
The super sleeper for Eno for starting pitching does not come from this tier. If you're looking for that Princess is another castle, I think, at this point. But I look at Roki Sasaki and I'm like, man, the K rate wasn't good last year. Even when he was working as a reliever, he wasn't missing a ton of bats. That was kind of a weird part of his season. The control was a little bit worse. He had good control during his time in Japan. And I'm trying to figure out just how much of Roki's year one struggles were the new ball, high expectations, physically not feeling right. There's just something missing from scouting reports from Roki in Japan and what we saw in 2025, and I'm not sure how much one off season is going to kind of close the gap between the two versions of him.
Yeah, the fact that the K- Bibee wasn't even really good as a reliever is a warning sign for me. In the model refresh, he did okay. No, he didn't. He did really badly. I'm looking at a sinker. He threw 2 sinkers, and they had a 134 stuff plus. So, hey, there you go. Throw the sinker, Roki. He threw 208 split fingers to a 100 stuff plus, 101 sliders to a 93 stuff plus, and 310 four-seamers to an 83 stuff plus. And I don't even want to report to you the location numbers. So, I got nothing. I got nothing to put my hands on other than that sinker. I guess he could come into camp and be like, "Hey, look at this! I have a 4-seam and a sinker now, and I'm gonna throw a lot of both of them, and that's gonna put people like not be able to hit my 4-seam and my fastball, and then I'm gonna drop this forkball that Eno stuff model seriously underrates, and everything's gonna come into focus, and Eno's gonna look like an idiot. But hey, at least I looked smart for a while when I faded him and said he wouldn't be good."
Yeah, I think Roki is at kind of a funny crossroads right now. You could probably still trade for him in keeper and dynasty leagues without giving up a ton. You can actually still get something back if you don't believe anymore. There's just as many buyers as there are sellers.
Traded for him in a keeper league last year.
Yep.
We don't need to put all your details out in the air if you don't want to, but you then traded him away this offseason and you still got something.
Yeah, got Shea Langoliers in a dynasty league straight up for him. So, I mean, it's a league that devalues catchers, but 20 teams. I don't know.
Yeah,
felt like that was at least getting something solid in the return. And if Roki comes back and is awesome, you shrug your shoulders and say, "Hey, I didn't quite see that coming this quickly."
I still got like a top 5 catcher.
I think you have to look at this and just say it's going to take some time because he has the look of a guy that needs to do a little bit of refinement before he's going to be a consistently good big league starter. Whether or not they're going to send him down, I have no idea. I get the sense they don't want to do that.
I hear there's some internal politics on the team that have something to do with players, asking them not to send him down. It's just a little strange for me.
Well, and I think that's where we were talking about Emmett Sheehan in part 2. I'm like, are they going to use Roki over him? Do they have other guys they like more than Sheehan, even though Sheehan shows great skills? And the other factor that's already changed in the last 24 hours since we talked about Emmett Sheehan, Blake Snell has a shoulder that's barking already. I guess it was barking in October when he was pitching well, too. It's like, so we're already going down that road again. So I feel like everything I said about Emmett Sheehan on part 2 should just be deleted and thrown in the trash.
River Ryan and Justin Robleski will combine for 20 starts. Bold prediction.
I guess. A couple more names to get to, though, because this episode is getting long. Hurston Waldrep. K-rate hasn't topped 25% since he reached AA. Bullpen risk still, I think, is there long term. But
Waldrep is a possible like model for Sasaki because his fastball's not good, but he just decided to throw 3 of them.
Yeah, I think the adjustments he made, he kind of got away from the 4-seamer and goes with like a sinker cutter approach to the fastball. And he throws the splitter a lot. Throws it like a third of the time. It's his best pitch. And if you think about their rotation, Sale, Schwellenbach, Strider, Ronald Lopez if healthy, the 5 is an open battle with Waldrep, Martin Perez, Grant Holmes, Bryce Elder, Joey Wentz. All those guys seem worse than Hurston Waldrep. Yeah. And if any one of those guys ahead of them, most likely Lopez, but any of them are hurt, his job looks pretty safe. So I think in a tier where I don't love a lot of the pitchers, Hurston Waldrep is the one that I actually kind of like because I think a little bit of role uncertainty is keeping his price pretty manageable.
Yeah, the splitter looks like a legit pitch. He commands enough to throw it that often. I think the slider he commands well. It doesn't have great action. And then the fastballs aren't great, but there's three of them now, and I think he can play them off each other pretty well. This is one where the stuff model doesn't push Oopsie to a great projection. It's a little bit better than the bat or ATC, but a 430 projection with a 141 whip. I think in this case, if you like him, you just look past the projections and you just take him. You just I think it's in a lot of leagues that's acceptable to me. If you just tell me I like him, fine. 396 Sierra is not bad. A 15% K minus BB is not bad. 95 mile an hour velo with a great splitter. Maybe models will underrate somebody like that. So I don't have him super high, but I wouldn't tell you if you were upset with my ranking or you're saying I'm going to take Horton and Waldrep. I have 118. That seems low. Yeah,
that seems low.
I'm going to move him up. I'm going to move him up at least into the. But the problem is, I really like a lot of guys in the 100s. Like that's where I put Jacob Latz and I can move him ahead of Roki Sasaki. Boom.
Okay.
Hurston Waldrep is 107 now.
Oh wow, 107. Very generous of you to move him up. I think I clearly like Hurston Waldrep a bit more than you do, for even with the shortcomings that we outlined at the top there. I think the bottom of that depth chart is actually very beatable for someone with his skills. So that's why I'm optimistic for 2026. I got a question for Dr. Eno here with Bryce Miller. The elbow problems last year were caused by a bone spur, which has not been removed, and it will likely be managed with periodic injections, like gel injections perhaps, and PRP and other rehab work. I thought, after seeing that he was feeling better at the end of the season and pitched well in the playoffs, I thought he had the bone spur removed, but he didn't. So now I'm starting to wonder if this is actually a good injury discount to take or not. Because had it been removed, my thinking was, of course, why wouldn't he pitch better? Now I'm just wondering if that bone spur becomes a problem again because I don't know enough about how bone spurs work.
Yeah, there is a little bit of a sea change, I think, in the league right now when it comes to bone spurs. Some people get the surgery to have them removed. I think that's the Carlos Rodón situation. Some people don't. One of the big markers for whether you do or you don't is is it enough pain to impede your regular motion? Does it change your command? Does it change how you pitch? Is it too much pain? And for Miller, maybe the pain's not too high, but he complained to me about losing his fastball command over the course of last year. So I would suggest that maybe those bone spurs were hurting him on the field, and that maybe he should get the surgery. There's also slightly, I don't know if I'm reading this correctly, but I did get an interesting email about talking about Tyler Glasnow. Was our discussion about Tyler Glasnow versus Brandon
Woodruff? Do you want the guy that had major surgery that he rehabbed, or do you want the guy that's got a bunch of stuff that keeps breaking?
And Timothy Charlton, who writes me from time to time, he's an orthopedic surgeon, professor of orthopedic surgery at Cedars-Sinai, and knows his stuff. He was like, well, I might actually take Woodruff because he identified the problem and fixed it and got it fixed. Whereas with Glasnow, you would assume that these are warning signs, all these little injuries, right? I responded, well, isn't there a school of thought that all surgery is bad and you want to avoid it as long as possible? Because surgeries have complications and failure rates and stuff like that. I have not gotten a response to that. I can keep you guys abreast of our ongoing conversation. But it is kind of interesting to think about Bryce Miller. He didn't have surgery. Good. He didn't have surgery. Bad?
It's just a little bit like that for me. I'm like, we got that proof of feeling better in the form of a very small sample when it mattered. And if he didn't feel good enough to pitch, maybe he wouldn't have been pitching at the end of the year. It's cheap enough, again, kind of like the Musgrove situation where you could say, all right, I'll take my shot. Maybe he's an SP3 being drafted like an SP6. And maybe he's still broken and I'm cutting him.
Speaking of Musgrove, we got to bring this chart back. Projections like.
Yes,
we got the projections like chart up, and Joe Musgrove is number one in this tier. Projected rank 45th, ADP rank 67, 22 spots of value for you. Jack Flaherty, no, not for me, but projected rank 44. This is by Oopsie. ADP rank 61. Bryce Miller, projected rank 54. ADP rank 71. I like that because what you're saying with this is I'm taking a guy at 71 that could be a top 50 pitcher. And if he's not, I move on. Aaron Nola, by the way, and Tanner Bibee are also on this list. They're about half the discount that Bryce Miller is getting right now. But we all know why the discount is there, and it's your taste for injury. I have a feeling that maybe that ADP goes up when we leave draft and hold season behind because people don't really want to take a guy they don't even know if he's healthy right now in draft and hold season.
I do think you're right. When there's more drafts happening with typical waiver wire movement, that'll probably be one of the factors that nudges Miller up, and the possibility of healthy, good-looking spring outings also looming out on the horizon too. Connelly early goes in this range. Looks like the 6th starter on the depth chart right now, but Johan Oviedo's the 5, so I don't think that's necessarily written in permanent marker. I mean, I think that's maybe more of a job battle. We should probably talk to Jed McCaffrey and figure out what's going on with that sort of pecking order at some point before we get to the end of spring training. But Connelly early's missed a lot of bats. I mean, the strikeout rate at least of 30% at every single stop. Had the best walk rate we've seen yet in a very limited sample with Boston. Projections say buy if you trust he's going to spend most of the year in the rotation. So what's your interest level in early at this price? He actually fell in one of the slow drafts I'm doing right now, probably 50 picks off his ADP, and a little sad I didn't get him.
Yeah, I think the buzz is that they traded for Oviedo. They're putting him in the rotation. Early obviously has options left and, can work on stuff. But I've also seen some video of Connelly early blowing up Eric Sim, which, of course he should. Connelly early is a quality major league pitcher, and Eric's been out of the league for a while. But and I love Eric. I'm not I'm not casting aspersions here. But Connelly early, I like him better as a pitcher than Johan Oviedo. But there might be just a pecking chart situation where they want to at least try Oviedo first. There's a question of if early's stuff looks almost exactly like Ranger Suarez's, just with more velo, more upside in terms of strikeout rate. And so that's an interesting thing. Do you want two of those same guys in the rotation? Oviedo looks like Tolle in terms of he has a fastball that looks very different than his arm slot suggests it should. And so Stuff Plus loves Oviedo's fastball, but it doesn't like any other. Well, it says that other pitches are average at best, pretty much below average. And we know that Oviedo's had a location problem where the model fits what people say, which is he can't locate the fastball, and he only locates the slider a little bit. It's above average location on the slider, but nothing else. So that's a little bit of a problematic arsenal for me. I think there's a way that this ends up in the bullpen pretty easily. But they traded for him. They like him. There are some similarities to Tolle. Maybe they just got two veteran guys that look like Tolle and early. And if those veteran guys don't work out, then Tolle and early come up. But this is too much of a price for me for a guy who's not in the top 5. I will take 6 starters because 6 starters average around 100 innings, 90 to 100 innings on the course of the season across the league. And those are draft and hold innings and stuff. But, in waiver wire leagues and stuff, I think this is too big of a chance that he doesn't make the big leagues. And then, what are you doing with that? Are you going to really, how deep is your bench? How long can you hold a Connelly early before you need to drop him for somebody who play for you right now?
Yeah, it was the 24th round of the 15-teamer that I'm in right now that Connelly early fell to. So I think if you're getting that kind of discount, it's actually worth the gamble. One starter gets hurt, things could change, especially if it's a long-term injury. I do think with the depth they have, short-term injury doesn't necessarily go to the best guy of the bunch, especially when Peyton Tolle's comparable. Sometimes it just goes on schedule too. So I'm very curious to see how it plays out in Boston with the back end of that rotation. Last name for today, Shane Smith, who just got absolutely hammered by Eno in the very beginning of this series for no reason. What did Shane Smith ever do to you, man? He's a good story. Rule 5 pick from the Brewers, pitched really well for the White Sox last year. 2 fastballs, 2 breaking balls, and a changeup. Slightly below average command. Projections point to a sharp drop-off, so the projections are kind of on the Eno side of, yeah, I can't get near Shane Smith at this price, but he's been good everywhere he's pitched. So I don't know, man. I think Shane Smith's one of those guys that there might be something weird about him that's making him get these results that don't quite line up with some of the underlying numbers.
Is it good if your best pitch is your fastball?
It's not ideal.
I don't think so. But it is still the pitch you throw the most. He threw 1,000 four-seamers last year with a 94 stuff plus on the revamp and a 106 location plus. That is an above-average four-seamer. The sinker, also above average. It's not elite, though. And the changeup and curve were below average. And the slider that he threw 268 of looked bad. Just bad. A righty without a slider, man, you got to do something so good for me to like you. Then on top of that, a 420 Sierra with an average K- Bibee. I just think the thing that people said, the prospect grades on his command from Fangraphs, 45 present, 45 future. I see a guy that the prospector said would be a reliever, and I agree.
Yeah. You know what I just noticed, though? I was just looking at a piece from our buddy James Fegan over at Sox Machine. I didn't know this about Shane Smith, by the way. He barely pitched during his time at Wake, and he was undrafted because he was hurt. So I think developmentally, he just might be a little bit behind relative to his age for a college guy, right? So there might just be more there they can unlock. And you might say, well, he was in the Brewers organization. Why doesn't he have a good slider? The Brewers are good at developing pitching. No one's perfect. No one's getting everything right every single time. And some of it's opportunity, too. I mean, Smith was also just buried in that org. So I'm not sure that I'm going to look at Smith and say he doesn't have the ability to improve the slider or change something in this mix. And I think the fact that he's got 5 pitches that are at least close to average gives you a sense that he has the feel. So I'm going to take a little more of an optimistic approach on Shane Smith.
Looking at his minor league strikeout rates, I am sure there was a robust discussion in the Brewers front office before they left him unprotected. I'm sure that they were.
So, yeah.
I'm sure that they thought they would lose him, and there was just a question of if it's acceptable loss and what the alternative was. So, I don't want to say that there's no chance that he can't push any of those. If he pushes any of those pitches, even a half grade up, he becomes a guy with 2 good pitches and a bunch of average pitches, which suddenly changes things, right? Mm-hmm. So as dumb as it sounds, like he comes to camp and he has a kick change and it looks amazing. I don't know. But his changeup prospect grades were his best. And by stuff plus 97, that's his best secondary. So I don't know what I want him to throw. He threw 3 sweepers last year. Maybe he comes to camp throwing sweepers.
I don't know, man, but I'm in. I'm in at the price. Opportunities there. Results were good. Seems like a late bloomer.
He'll be on my rankings. I don't know. Like he was just off. The projections aren't really fun for him. 4.5 ERA projection for him from Oopsie. So I'll put him in somewhere, but it won't make anybody happy. I'll put him in.
No, it'll still be under ranked probably for the liking of many people. Yeah. Still feels a little harsh, but that's fine. They're your ranks, man. You gotta rank with your heart. Rank with your heart and your brain. We're going to go. On our way out the door, reminder, you can join our Discord. The conversation continues in there. We're going to take a quick break from the series. Our Friday episode is going to take a look at some news that's gone down over the past week. Framber Valdez has a new team. We had a big trade that sent Brendan Donovan to Seattle, so we'll catch up on some transactions, and of course, we'll catch up with Jordan Rosenblum and Jeff Zimmerman. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening. Oh, and congrats, Scooble. Jeez.